Hello and welcome to Full Throttle. Now, last episode we had the very Arab Lycan Hypersport, and we asked if it was if it deserved to be a hypercar. And this episode we're going to start off with another car that tries to achieve hypercar status as well. The very German Gumpert Apollo. Now, whenever we looked at the Lycan, we tried to find an angle where it didn't look beautiful. For this, it's the exact opposite. We can't find an angle that makes the car look good. I mean, if you look at it right now, it's not the most prettiest car in the world. It's not the cheapest either, costing around £275,000, which may be cheap for a supercar, actually for a hypercar, but we don't know. But if you look at it right now, from where we can see, I don't even know why it's that price, because if you look right there, there's no rear window, there's very few optional extras inside, and that over there, that camera, that doesn't count. That's a necessity because there's no back window. So you would think that it'd be fast. Actually, if it's a fast car and it doesn't come with a lot of equipment, that it may achieve hypercar status. But the question is, does it? Well, I went to Norway to find out. Hello, you join me here in Norway, where I am currently road testing the Gumpert Apollo S, and there's no avoiding it. Let's just get straight to it. The first problem, this car is a problem. So you see, I know this road to be smooth as a baby's behind, which is incredibly smooth. But driving on it right now, in this car, in this particular moment, it makes, I don't know if it's the suspension or the chassis or whatever, but it's bumpy, and it makes it feel rough and hard when it should be, you know? And that's not a very good point in a hypercar. Another problem, the looks. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there's a perfectly valid reason for the looks. It's just, I'm not a particular fan of the looks. Honestly, I think it looks like a boil on the buttock of a baboon. Another problem is its gearbox. I mean, I don't know how it is on the track. We'll figure out how that is later. But on the road, it's a 7-speed flappy paneled gearbox, and that's the problem right there. Flappy panels are not very known to be good on the roads. They change a bit too early or a bit too late. They don't change it they don't change gear whenever you want to change gear. It's not immediate. If you think that I hate this car, I don't actually. I actually quite like it. Actually, well, it's not all bad news though. The engine is a good one. It has a 4.2 litre twin turbocharged V8 that produces about 700 brake horsepower, which in a car like this is not too bad. It doesn't weigh a lot. It only weighs about like 3,000 pounds or something or other, kilograms. I'm not so sure about the averages. And thanks to the lightness in the engine, this car goes from 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, and it has a top speed of not a particularly high 213 miles an hour, which is good, but it's not hypercar standards, which is the only bad thing about the engine. But let's see what else on the road as well. The boot What boot? I mean, the back is taken up by the engine. There's no rear window. And the front, even if there is a boot in there, you can't open it. Gumpert have welded it. They've welded that sort of the front part, which means you can't get in. And it may cost like £273,000, which again isn't a lot for a hypercar, but you don't get much in the way of car, because I mean, apart from the computer, which technically doesn't count because there's no back window, there's nothing here. So I'd have to say overall the Gumpert Apollo S is not a particularly good car on the roads. That may change when we head to the racetrack. So let's take it there and find out how good it is. Okay, I've only been driving the Apollo for a short time on this track, but all the slight wee niggles that I had, like the suspension, the transmission, and so on, seem to be fixed when I'm on a track. I mean, when I'm on this racetrack, that engine is fantastic. The acceleration as well, it gives it a bit of a oomph, you know? The steering is light, but not too aggressive, which means that I can, and because it's mid-engined rear-wheel drive, I can still hoon it about, which, who doesn't love drifting? And earlier on I complained about the looks of this being like a boil on the buttock of a baboon, I believe were my words. But when you're on here on a racetrack, you could sort of see why. I mean, that front, for example, teamed with the attachment, actually the air intake on the roof, and the huge rear wing at the back, along with the diffusers at the back and the front, it makes the car more aerodynamic, you see, which is always a plus. Therefore, the wind gets more, wind resistance. It pushes the car down, hunkers it down, makes it more track focused. However, it isn't without its share of problems. One that we have to address straight away is the traction control, or the ABS, as some people like to call it. I mean, when you're on a racetrack, you would normally turn the traction control off, you know, because if you kept the traction control on, you'd be slower. But do you want to see what happens when you turn the traction control off in this car? Alright, fair enough. I did warn you. Now this is what happens. What? Your back end loses traction and you go off. The steering is light. The steering is light, but perhaps with the traction control off, it's a little bit too light. And of course you spin around a lot. But, of course, if you understand this car, if you understand its boundaries, if you respect them, and if you leave the traction control on, suddenly it becomes a completely different animal. It becomes docile. It becomes tame. It's easy to drive. I mean, very little effort I'm putting in to actually make this car go around the corner. And even that drift here, that drift there, even with the traction control on, you could still do that, but it doesn't like unintentionally drift, only when the traction control is off. Or another problem is, the only thing is, don't drive this on the wet, because it'll spin up the gears. It'll spin up its rear tires through third and fourth gear, thereby missing it. Overall, the Gumpert is a bit of a mixed bag, because on the road It's uncomfortable, impractical, it looks ugly, the wheelbase is too long, it's too long, too bad. But on the track, it's a good, focused, knife-edged racer. So this brings me to my final verdict, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's an average car. I mean, the question is it a hypercar? No. But it's a really, really good supercar. So that's my final verdict. And, well, time to figure out how fast this goes around the racetrack. So let's give it to our racing driver to find out.